Welcome back to Stories for Kids. If you are listening this from my podcast, please like it, share it, and share it with your friends and family. If you are watching this from my YouTube channel with Sudeshna, then please subscribe if you have not subscribed yet, because we are going to read more and more interesting stories. So today this is the episode 4 for Akbar and Birbal series. So without wasting much time, let's start our first story, which is Most Beautiful Child. Once, Emperor Akbar declared in the court that his grandson was the most beautiful child in the whole land. He was very fond of his newborn grandson. Akbar loved his grandson so much that after the child was born, Akbar could hardly concentrate on his duties as the emperor. He would play with the child all day. This made ministers worry. So when Akbar said his grandson was the most beautiful child in the land, Birbal said, Jahapana, please do not be offended. The prince is no doubt a beautiful child, but I think there are children more beautiful than him. Akbar was very angry when he heard this. He said, How can you say this? I order all the ministers to bring a child they think is most beautiful. If those children are more beautiful than my grandson, I would agree with what Birbal has said. The next day, each minister brought a child to the court, but Birbal was nowhere to be seen. Then, after some time, Birbal came to the court. He was drenched with sweat. Akbar asked, Where is the child you said was more beautiful than my grandson? Birbal said, Your Majesty, I tried to bring the child to the court, but his mother wouldn't let me. If you can dress like a commoner, we can go to see the child. Akbar and some of his ministers dressed as commoners and went with Birbal to see the child. After a long walk, they come to a hut. A child was playing on a heap of dirt outside the hut. He was bald and covered with dirt. One of its eyes was smaller than the other, and streams of water ran from nose. Akbar said to Birbal, You think this child is more beautiful than the prince? He is so ugly. But as Akbar said it, the child's mother came out of the hut. She was very angry at the man who was standing and looking at the child. She said, Who are you? How dare you call my son ugly? Get out of here. And she picked up the child, wiped his face with the end of her sari, and kissed him. She said to the boy, Don't listen to these men, darling. You are the most beautiful child in the land. And she took the little boy inside. Akbar understood what Birbal wanted to say. He said, Every child is most beautiful in the land for their parents. Birbal smiled and said, And at times for their grandparents. The next story is Strange Invitation. Emperor Akbar would often lose his temper with Birbal. On one such occasion, he asked Birbal to leave the royal court and never return. This hurt Birbal very much, and he left the city one night without letting anyone know. After a few days, Akbar began to miss Birbal very much. He realized he had been a little too harsh on poor Birbal. So the emperor sent his messengers to look for Birbal in the neighboring town and cities. But alas, none of the messengers could find Birbal. Akbar thought, Birbal must have disguised himself. This is why the messengers have not been able to find him. There has to be some other way of finding out where Birbal is hiding. Akbar ordered his ministers to send invitation card to all the kings of the city. The invitation card was very strange, for it and read, The sea of my kingdom wants to get married. All the rivers of your kingdom are invited. Please send them as early as possible, as the marriage will take place next week. All the kings who received the invitation were very puzzled. They did not know what to write in reply. So they decided not to reply to the invitation and pretend as if they had not received it. But after some days, Emperor Akbar received a reply from one of the kings. It said, Thank you very much for your kind invitation. We shall be happy to send our rivers for the wedding, but they have requested that Yoshi must come halfway to receive them. Akbar laughed very hard for a long time when he read the reply. Then, with his guards, he went to the city of the king to request Birbal to return. Akbar had guessed it right. Indeed, Birbal was living with the king who had sent the reply. Akbar was very happy when he found Birbal. He said, "I knew only you could have written a fitting reply to my invitation. I am really sorry for hurting you. Please come back to my court." Birbal too was glad to see that the emperor himself had come to take him back. He bade farewell to the king and left the city with Akbar. The next story is Sweet Punishment. One day, Akbar came to court in a very thoughtful mood. He looked around at all his ministers present at the court and said, "My dear ministers, tell me, what punishment should I give to the one who dares to pull my beard?" The court was alarmed at such a strange question. Everyone began to discuss among themselves about how usual the offense was. Who would dare to pull emperor's beard? One of the ministers said, "My lord, someone who dares to do such a deed must have his hand chopped off." Another minister said, "Yes, my lord, he deserves nothing less than death." Then another rose and said, "Your Majesty must punish such an evildoer with life imprisonment. He should be thrown in the dungeons with the rats." The ideas for a fitting punishment came pouring in. The ministers got more and more creative as they went on discussing. Akbar was listening to all of them with great relish. Finally, he turned to Birbal and said, "Why, dear Birbal, are you so quiet? What do you think should be a fitting punishment for the one who dares to pull my beard?" Birbal rose and bowed to the emperor. Then he said, "Your Majesty, he should be showered with kisses and hugs and given lots of sweets to eat." At the court broke into a surprise. Again, a minister said, "My lord, it is nothing less than a crime to pull the emperor's beard, and Birbal wants the person to be given sweets." Akbar was smiling. He asked Birbal, "Why do you think it is a fitting punishment?" Birbal replied, "My lord, who else will dare to pull your beard but your own grandchildren?" Birbal was right. That morning when the emperor was playing with his grandson, he had mischievously pulled his grandfather's beard. Akbar had thought it was a good idea to test his ministers, so he put the strange question to them. Only Birbal had been able to answer the question correctly. Akbar presented Birbal with a bag of gold for his intelligent thought. The next story is Birbal's daughter in the royal court. Birbal had a 7-year-old daughter. One day she said to him, "Father, I have heard so much about Emperor Akbar's court. Will you take me there with you tomorrow?" Birbal said, "Yes, dear, we shall go to there tomorrow morning." Next day they went to royal court. When Akbar saw Birbal's daughter, he asked, "Do you know Persian?" The child replied, "Your Majesty, a little less and a little more." Akbar turned to Birbal and said, "I did not understand what your daughter said. Can you please explain?" Birbal said, "Your Majesty, she means that she knows Persian a little less than those who knows it well, and a little more than those who don't know Persian." Akbar was impressed with the child's intelligence. He chuckled in an amusement and said, "Birbal, your daughter is indeed as smart as you. You must be so proud of her." The next story is Boy in the Mango Orchard. One evening, Akbar was strolling in his mango orchard. Suddenly, an arrow whizzed by. Akbar ordered, "Soldiers, find the person who tried to kill me." Soon the soldiers fetched the boy who had shot the arrow. Akbar asked, "Why did you try to kill me?" The boy said, "Your Majesty, I was aiming at a ripe mango, but the arrow almost hit you instead." Akbar angrily ordered, "Soldiers, kill the boy in the same way he tried to kill me." The soldiers tied the boy to a tree nearby. When they were about to shoot the boy, Birbal said, "Your Majesty, in order to kill the boy in the same way, you should aim for a mango. The arrow should miss the mango and hit the boy instead." Akbar said, "If the boy had wanted to kill me, he would have aimed at me, not at the mango. Let him go." The next story is Akbar's ring in the well. Once, Akbar went hunting with his courtiers. Birbal was also with him. When some time had passed, Akbar felt thirsty. Soon they spotted a well. Akbar got off his horse and peeped into it. The well was dry. He was about to turn away when one of his rings slipped from his finger into the well. Birbal saw this. He left the place, only to return after some time with some fresh cow dung. He threw the dung on the ring. Then he tied a long string to a stone and threw it on the cow dung. Then they all went hunting. Before sunset, Birbal asked Akbar to stop by the well. Then he pulled the string. Along with it came the stone, which had stuck to the dried cow dung. Underneath it all there was Akbar's ring, set in the dung. Akbar praised Birbal and gave him precious gift. So now today's last story is the tub of milk. One morning, Akbar and Birbal were strolling in the royal garden. Akbar said, "My subjects always obey me." Birbal replied, "But they also fear you, your majesty." Akbar said, "Unbelievable, prove it." Birbal said, "Your majesty announced that the subject should pour a pot of milk into a tub placed in the royal courtyard." Akbar did so and added that he was going on a hunting trip for a few days. When he returned, he found that the tub was full of water. Birbal said, "Your majesty announced that the subject should fill the tub with milk and say that you will check the tub once you are back after hunting." Akbar did so and left for his hunting trip once again. When he returned, he saw that the tub was full of milk. Birbal asked Akbar, "Now do you believe that all your subjects obey you out of fear, your majesty?" Akbar nodded and smiled. With this, I am ending today's episode. Wait for the next episode. Thank you for listening. And if you want to be part of Creative Thinking Academy, where I read stories, such type of stories, we interact, we question each other, and we learn how to tell stories, then please check the link below and attend a free session and check whether you like it or not. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.